Hi, friend. Welcome to another episode of the Your Audio Solutions podcast, where it's my mission to find the tools and methods from the people that inspire you so you can apply their knowledge to your own life and work. And on the show today, we have renowned blues guitarist, songwriter, Joanna Connor. And if you haven't heard her, she's a killer blues guitarist, first of all, but she also has some killer records out already. I'll leave a link to her Spotify in the description below. But she has a new record coming out, produced by Joe Bonamassa, engineered by our friend JJ Blair, who's been on the show a few times already, actually, twice last year. It's called 4801 South Indiana Avenue, and again, produced by Joe, engineered by JJ. It's coming out on the 26th of February, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But it's going to be a killer record. There's already a single out called I Feel So Good, which you can also check out below. I'll leave a link to that as well. But it's such a cool record, or it sounds to be like a cool record, having just heard a single. But having had JJ on the show, who's a killer engineer and mixer, it's already sounding awesome. So I'm sure the rest of the album is going to sound killer as well. But it was a real pleasure having Joanna on the show, talking to her about playing guitar, blues guitar, not being stuck in a blues box. Like I'm sure if you're a guitarist, you might have been. I have been stuck in this box for a while sometimes. And it was awesome talking to her about that and working with Joe and JJ and much, much more. And I hope you're going to like our conversation as well. But before we get into the interview with Joanna, I'd love for you to check out the Audio Tribe email list, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Just click the link and enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe. And what do you get if you join the Audio Tribe? Well, you get exclusive access to interviews before the public, chance to ask up-and-coming guests questions, and much more stuff that I like to do as the channel is growing. So feel free to join. It's free, of course. And also, please hit subscribe on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your support really helps grow the channel, and we're growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So I really do appreciate your support. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Joanna Connor. So please enjoy.
Technology, it baffles me.
Exactly. But this seems to be working fine.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. So how you doing, Joanna? And also, first of all, thank you for taking your time. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for asking me.
That was a
I'm good.
pleasure.
I'm good.
Nice. So where are you now? Are you in Chicago or New York? Where are you?
I'm in Chicago. I've lived in Chicago since '85. So yeah, I
Ah,
am. Well, right now I'm living in the suburbs of Chicago, in a very nice suburb, I must say. But
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, I've never been to Chicago at all, so I don't know the place at all. Which suburb is it?
it's called La Grange, Illinois. It's really
Ah,
not like the number one suburb. It's got like a lot of it's pretty very it's beautiful. Like the house I'm renting is like from the 1800s, so
wow.
I live in the historic district, and beautiful houses, really nice main street, really liberal kind of town. It's good schools. It's just like pretty idyllic. So I ended up here by accident, but I like it. So me and my dogs have a nice little home. My
Nice.
grown now, so they're one is in LA and one is in New Mexico. So yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's perfect to be in Chicago, if especially being a blues guitar player. I mean, there's no better place to start or
True.
be.
Yes, that's why I came here. I,
Yeah.
'cause I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up near Boston, and I always loved the blues. And I was like, I went here when I was like 19 on a vacation, like a cross country trip, and we stopped in Chicago. And I'm like, oh, I'm living here because the scene back in the 80s was incredible. I mean, it's still good, but it was
Hmm.
really, really incredible. Thanks, all the greats. Most of them were still alive. I mean, Muddy Waters wasn't there, and Howlin' Wolf, but so many of the others are still alive. So I got a chance to play with them, and just being here was amazing. So I did move
Right.
here, and I never left. So
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So
yeah,
where exactly is Chicago? Is it so it's central or where
in
in the
the
US?
in the center,
Right.
it's the middle. I mean, it's kind of east. It's not dead center, but it's considered. It's the Midwest, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
central located. Yeah, we're
So you
on the
get
big Michigan.
say it again.
We're on the big Lake Michigan. You know, it's right
Mm,
there on the Great Lakes, and
right.
yeah,
But so
it just looks like this outside, as you can see.
right. But so do you get really cold winters and really warm summers? Is that
Yeah,
the thing? Yeah.
yeah. Everything's kind of extreme, you know.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
like we're in between the Rocky Mountains and the ocean in Canada, so you know we get a lot of crazy weather. But
Mm.
you know, I grew up on the East Coast where we get tons of snow, and it's kind of the same way. So I'm used to it. You know, my kids are like, my son's like he's in the sun every day. My daughter's in the sun and warm, and they're like, we never want to live in Chicago again. Whatever.
I can see that. Because I grew up in Sweden, and we used to have a lot of snow
Mhm.
when I was a kid, but that's stopped many years ago. Unfortunately, you know, getting warmer,
Oh,
climate change, all that,
yeah,
which was a shame because it's really nice when you have a lot of snow in the winter.
I agree. Yeah, we don't get. I've lived here all those years, and we've had I don't know like two major storms in 30 something years. I'm like,
Wow.
there's not that much. Like right now, we have about an inch of snow on the ground.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's the same here. The climate change is definitely happening for sure.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Like, yeah.
Hmm. But
So you're now?
mm, so now I'm in Leeds. Actually, I used to live in London for
Oh,
7 years. Just
okay.
moved up here. Yeah,
Okay. Gotcha.
yeah.
Nice.
So the COVID thing accelerated the move. You know, there was no point living in London really anymore, and it's
Yeah.
kind of nice being out of a big city like that. You know. Um,
Yeah. And now's not the time to live in the big city.
no,
Anyway,
exactly,
I
exactly,
know.
exactly. Yeah, but yeah. So now we live in Leeds, and it's just been a few, maybe a month or so.
Oh, okay.
Coming up to a month. Just we're gonna get our own place here. Me and my fiance. Uh,
Nice.
so now we're just living with her parents until the flat we sold is all being sorted out and finding a new place, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You know,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Well, good
But
luck
it's
with that.
cool. Yeah, thank you, thank you. So Jen, I was listening to and also uh, before I was listening to your single, and I know you've been working with JJ Blair and obviously Joe Bonamassa, but I was listening to your new single, "I Feel So Good," and that was the first time I actually heard your music. But I thought it
Hmm.
was badass, really really
Thank
cool.
you.
Well,
I think that one is pretty badass,
yeah,
actually.
definitely. I mean, it's really it's a like a train that just keeps on rolling in that
Hmm.
song. Yeah,
I agree. I will agree with you on that. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, wow, that was on fire. That was a lot of energy right there.
definitely. Did you
Hmm.
record the album live or was it overdubbing mostly or how did you do it?
The only thing we overdubbed was the vocals and the horns, and that was it. Everything else is live. All the guitar solos, everything.
Because it feels like that too, you know.
Good. That's yeah. That's why we did it. That was Joe's whole. It's really his vision. I mean, he asked me. He's like, I want to do a record with you, but I want you to trust me because I have a vision for you, and I want to see it through. And but you have to trust me. I'm like, I trust you. You have a great track record, and he's. I mean, you know, I'm not going to argue with Joe Bonamassa. I mean, musically
Hmm.
or business wise. I'm like, and it ended up that I agreed with everything he was thinking and feeling, so it wasn't a problem for me. You know.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what was his vision for the record? Like
Well,
what did he
he
tell you that was like, oh shit, I don't know if is that me or was there
right.
anything like that?
Well, the first thing he said was, "I'm going to be a dictator." He's got he's got a dry sense of humor. He goes, "I want to take what do you say? I want to take what you do best live and truncate it and capture that lightning in a bottle. This is the words I remember him saying. And I want the vocals to be as tough as your guitar playing. He goes, because everybody knows your guitar playing, but he goes, I think your vocals can deliver more than they've delivered in the past. And he goes, I want to make a record that I want to listen to, that I want to put in this record and say, this is the Joanna Connor record. This is what I want to hear. And I'm like, okay. He goes, I'm going to push you really hard. I'm going to work you really hard. And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm ready, you know? So,
Nice.
yeah.
Was there any like uncomfortable like moments where you like he pushed you that you thought, can I go further, or is this what's gonna happen if I go further? How do you even go further sometimes? Because that's even harder question, I guess, because you think you might have reached your limit. So how did it push you
Yeah.
further?
It was interesting. I mean, guitar wise, that wasn't so difficult. I mean, the only different thing for me was we used no pedals at all. It was straight guitar straight into an amp, which for me, I never do that unless I'm playing something like jazzy or, just real sweet. But I'm always using like overdrive, not a ton of pedals, but I'm using my overdrive. I've got my delay, I've got my little thing. So that first I was like, but it sounded good. So I just surrendered to it. I was like, okay, it sounds good. Um, Vocally, I mean, I really pushed my voice, like I really pushed it hard and harder than I normally would. But it was the way he told me, he goes, I won't mention who it is. He goes, I've worked with another singer and she was actually in the lobby crying. And I didn't push her as hard as I pushed you. And I was
Wow.
like, man, you're not bothering me. I mean, I literally, when I first moved to Chicago, I was 22 years old. I was from Boston, Massachusetts area. I'm in Chicago in like a black club, the only white person there playing the blues, and guys would yell. I mean, they wanted me to be there, but they were tough. I mean, they're tough with each other. They're like, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Why are you playing that? You're like screaming and swearing and guns and knives. I mean, the whole thing. These are old hardcore blues guys. So I'm like, I told Joe, I'm like, Joe, nothing you could do could be as rough as what I went through, when I was a 22-year-old girl coming to Chicago. So for me, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, that this school, like guys here are really, they're hardcore, it's like, that's part of the culture. Like they talk shit about each other. Like, hey man, what are you doing? You're playing, and it's like they kid, like even when they're kidding around, they tease each other mercilessly. So I'm like, I was so used to all that. I'm like, nothing you can do is going to really rattle me that much. But it
Right.
ended up being a good thing because, I mean, he made me reach down, and he would tell me, he's like, I want that emotion. I want you to, and he'd paint like these pictures of sadness or whatever, or being angry. And it was kind of like a movie director. And he's like, okay, now do it. And it's more for the singing than the playing. The playing, but this, even with the playing, you'd be like, oh, in this song, I want you, like one song I played kind of sloppy, almost on purpose. He's like, I want you to just play like really crazy single lines, like you're a maniac. But I was like, okay. So so it was actually kind of fun. It was sort of
Nice.
like rising to I like challenge, and I like to prove to myself and to other people, like, yeah, I can do that. I think part of it is, being a female musician. And like today, I had to have the internet fixed in my house, and there was a guy. He's like, "Who plays all the guitars?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
me." He's like, "You're a guitar player?" And then he looks on the internet and he goes, "Wow, I can't judge a book by its cover." And I mean, I've heard that so much, especially now that I'm older. Like, I look like I'm someone's mom, and I am. And then I get up and play. So I'm kind of used to that mentality anyway. Like, oh, let me prove that I can do what I do. So it was kind of the same in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up because I actually want to get into that later. But like you
Mm-hmm.
said, like you said, the guy asking, oh, who plays all the guitars? Because when we were selling our flat in London, because I play guitar and there was guitars and synths in the living room, and everyone obviously assumed, not obviously, but a lot of people assumed, oh, that's me. But that's the
Right.
same situation like you could as well have been my fiance or girlfriend at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I mean, I mean, I don't want to assume, but being a woman or a young girl when you start out, how that must have been tough, I guess. I mean, you told people had knives and guns. I mean, that would be scary me even. But how was? Did you get a lot of shit for that starting out?
It depends. Yeah, I'd say it was 50-50. I mean, 50% of the people and the musicians were like super supportive and kind, and there was some of them that like literally a woman came at me with a knife one night. She's like, "You're not singing in my town." I was like,
Wow.
"Holy!" I was like, and I mean, I grew up kind of, you know, I was a fighter. I don't know. I used to get into fights. I wasn't like really a bad kid, but I didn't put up with anybody's crap. So I would, but still, I was like, oh boy, no one's ever pulled a knife on me over singing,
Wow.
but yeah. So I went through that, and like the guy I played in the band with, he's like, Joanna, go get me an E string out of my effects bag. And that's when I found a gun. I was like, oh, jeez.
Oh
So
wow.
it was like, and I saw like, one guy hit another guy in the head with his Stratocaster and knocked him out. I mean, it's just crazy, real life drama. It's not so much like that now, but back when I first started, yeah. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was I had my fair share of incidences, and then people being like, it wasn't like automatically like, oh yes, let's see if she can. I mean, I'd walk into clubs, they'd be looking at me like, what is she doing here? And then I'd start to play, and they'd be like, oh, okay, you know. So yeah.
That's the best form of revenge. you know. But so you said you were tough. I don't know if you said we're in a lot of fights, but do you think that's why you started playing guitar because you wanted to get some of that aggression out? I mean, like just going to that song now. I mean, because I feel so good. That was recorded now, obviously, but and I've seen your guitar playing from before as well. There is a lot of not aggression, but there is attitude. That's the one I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
I
Do
mean,
yeah.
I think there's just a part of me that's when I was a young girl, I loved sports and I
Oh,
really was competitive and I was pretty good at it. And actually, I found out I didn't know who my father was, but I found out now my father was a professional basketball player,
wow.
and I didn't even know that. And my daughter actually is a basketball player. So, and my son was a football player. So it ran through our genes. But and then I realized back in those days there was no professional women athletes except for tennis players, and I didn't play tennis. So it was like I was like, well, you know what? How come guys get to have all the fun? They get to be Jimmy Page. They get to be, hockey player. And it's like, what do we get to do as women? So I was like, when I started playing guitar, I'm like, well, you know what? I've never seen too many women do this, but they can't tell me I can't do it. It's not like when you play baseball. Well, there's no professional women's baseball team.
Wow.
But so that kind of was a driving thing for me because it seemed like all the things that I like to do were traditionally boys or men would be doing them.
Hmm.
So yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, so
Hmm.
who for like for a better word tickled your brain to be like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's a guitar. I want to play a guitar. What was that moment for you?
We're having trouble here, I
I
think.
think we're back.
Okay, we are back. What you were asking me a question and everything just froze, so I didn't hear
Right, right,
you.
right. No, yeah, I was asking, for lack of a better word, when you did start out playing guitar, who tickled your brain to be like, oh, I want to play guitar? Who was that female or male player
Oh,
who made you?
back then it was Jimi Hendrix, it was Keith Richards, it was Jimmy Page and Bonnie Raitt. So those are the four people, and then later Buddy Guy. So those
Hmm.
are the people that really, at first, I was like, oh yeah, I wanna play, and then there was many more people after that.
Yeah, yeah. What was it with Jimmy Page playing? Because I was also a fan of his growing up, but then when I was got a bit older, I was like went back to listen to him, and I just discovered his playing was so sloppy. Not in bad way, but I just didn't know that growing up.
Well, yeah, when the more you play, the more you go like, oh, I used to think this person was great, but yeah, now I can do what they do. I think what it was about Jimmy Page is not so much his solos per se, but his riffs. I
Hmm.
mean, the riffs that he came up with, like Whole Lot of Love. I mean, that in and of itself is like,
That's
and the
killer,
same
yeah.
with Richards. Keith Richards isn't a great solo guitarist, but almost every Stones tune they ever wrote was based on his rhythm guitar playing. So, I mean, as like I said, as I went down the line and got more and more into playing, I mean, I love guys like John McLaughlin and Robin Ford and Joe Bonamassa and the more real technically astounding players. But it was guys like that in the beginning that would just have those riffs that would just get to you. It's like
Mm,
the glue in the song. So you know,
yeah,
that's and I just love the whole Zeppelin and Stones. I mean, their songs were so tremendous.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, such good songwriters and just
Yeah.
bands, you know.
Yes.
Like I love that record. What's it called Exile on Main Street.
Yeah.
That's
Great
a
record.
that's a terrific record. You can definitely also, going back to what we said about your record, you can definitely hear them playing live together in a room.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
hmm
awesome.
It
Uh,
is.
which is your favorite Stones record?
I would say probably XL on Main Street and Let It Bleed. I liked a lot.
Okay,
You know. Yeah. But I would say XL on Main Street is probably my favorite.
I need to check. What was the other one called? You said.
Let It Bleed. They're like on it looks like they're like the little figures on like a cake. And it's got a lot of like Delta blues and different things on it.
I need to make a note of it. Let it bleed.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. But going back to your new record, because we talked about you working with Joe Bonamassa, but I know your engineer was JJ Blair, who's been on this show a few times. Great guy, great engineer too. Um, so how was it? Did I lose you?
Mm-hmm. Are you back?
I think I'm back. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you had JJ Blair a lot on your show? That's the last thing I heard.
Yeah. So JJ was your obviously engineer, and like I said, he's been on the show a few times. Great guy. How was it working with him?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you said, for example, with "I Feel So Good," like you wanted a rougher sort of vocal, and that was also one of my impressions that JJ really helped get through on the song too. With his
Mm-hmm.
recording mixing skills. But how is it for you, like an artist working with an engineer? Like, what do you expect? Like, how do you communicate with them? What's your approach to the engineer?
Ooh, well, that's rough because this is my downfall. I have like no technology scares me, so it gives me the anxiety. So I know what I like to hear, and so when I've made my own records that I produce more, I'll tell them, "Hey, can you give it more this or that? It needs more. That can you make it sound like this?" So I'll describe it in very non-technical terms. Um, and engineers, I have the utmost respect for them because they do things I cannot do at all, and it's amazing to me. And I mean, a guy like JJ, I mean, he's so accomplished and so knowledgeable. And him and Joe and Austin, the other engineer, would sit and talk about microphones and just things. And I'm just sitting there like, like an idiot, but what, just listening. And it was fascinating to me. But what was really cool about JJ was I was sitting in the hotel, like when I first got there and we were about to go to Joe's place to like knock out some arrangements. And he's like, "Hi, Joanna, I'm JJ." And he goes, "I have to tell you something. And I'm the engineer and blah, blah." He goes, "I used to sneak out of my house when I was in high school to go see your band." And he like named everyone in the band and the songs and I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, and here we are, and I didn't know him. And he was like, he goes, "Yeah, I was always too afraid to talk to you," and blah, blah, blah. And that to me was really absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, that's cool
Um,
though.
Very cool.
Yeah. But how do you, as an artist, you said that was not your expertise really, like what mics to use, etc. Maybe, but what do you feel the not the engineer should do, but what does the engineer do to make you feel more relaxed? Like, has there been some good examples? Maybe in even JJ's case.
Well, I say like I've worked with a lot of. I've maybe had one bad experience on one record, which I won't name. with an engineer that we never saw eye to eye. I mean, I didn't like the way anything sounded, and he was very, aggressive about what he wanted. And I'm like, so that record to me to this day, I listen to it, I'm like, oh. But other than that, all the other engineers I've ever worked with, and I've recorded in Germany, Holland, Nashville now, Chicago, Boston, and the engineers are like usually like some very um like they want it to make you feel comfortable. They want to get on your page. Like they're very accommodating and relaxed and sympathetic, and sometimes they'll come up with ideas and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Like
Hmm.
I think they're like musicians in the sense that they're contributing so much to everything, to the performance, to the atmosphere, to and then in the end you'll hear it in the product. But most engineers are really interesting people, and people I enjoy being around. So
Hmm.
um in this case, in this album, it was mostly Joe and him that were communicating, and I was kind of, sitting back, listening to them talk about how to do things and what they want. And sometimes JJ would be like, "Man, really, you want that? You want it like that?" And Joe's like, "Yeah, I want it like that." So he'd be like, "Okay, Joe," because it was like a lot of old fashioned kind of over the top things bleeding into each other. Everything wasn't baffled. It was and so JJ had a lot on his hands because it wasn't like a clean recording per se, and Joe wanted it like that. So
Hmm.
JJ was like, "Oh, I don't usually do things like this," but he did it, and
Cool.
so it was interesting to watch the two of them interact.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can imagine. I mean, they're both
Yeah.
awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
do you usually let the producer and engineer take not control? That's not the word, but do you usually sit back and listen, or do you usually have a hands-on approach?
This is the first record since my first two albums. So since 1992 that I have not been hands on. Every record since then I've been like right there making every decision, with the engineer and the producer.
Right.
And the last few I produced myself. So usually me and the engineer would really work closely because I was sort of like my own producer. So
Hmm.
this is the first time I did that, and I mean that was from the get go. Joe told me, "Hey, I want you to trust me," and I'm like, "I trust you. I will trust you. Trust me." So that's how it was interesting for me. But what was great about it was, I mean, it could have been a disaster if it was something that I didn't really like. I thought about that. I'm like, wow, what if I get in the studio and I'm gonna let Joe do what he does because I respect him so much. But what if we don't see it eye to eye? But we ended up seeing eye to eye, so it ended up being a really easy, fun, and wonderful experience. I had nothing bad. There was no tension. There was no negativity. There's no arguing. Everything
Hmm.
really flowed well.
Hmm. That's awesome. Because
Yeah.
like you said, because when you start out the project, the if you haven't had a lot of conversations before, there can be a lot of ideas coming in, and
Mhm.
the engineer thinks this is a great drum sound, the producer thinks this is another drum sound, the
Right.
artist thinks this is another good drum sound, as an example.
Yeah.
So did you have a lot of conversations before about what sort of direction, or it was like you said, Joe had a specific plan and he just said, do you want to get on this ride?
There was more like that, but I mean,
Hmm.
we did talk like he before we had a few months before we went in the studio where he was sending me songs.
Hmm.
What do you think of this? What do you think of that? I have, I want to use this guy, that guy, and in the studio. And then Josh Smith had a lot of input because he got the rhythm section in there, and they were tremendous. So, and I had known Josh Smith since he was a kid, and it was so that was also cool. And but so Joe wasn't like a dictator, although he calls himself that. I was the malevolent dictator, whatever he said, benevolent. That's what he says. I was a benevolent dictator,
Hmm.
and but he was, but I felt like he was correct on everything he wanted. So
Nice.
it was not. It was great for me. It was just like, okay, yeah, let me go along for the ride,
Hmm.
and I was just sitting there watching, like when we did the arrangements. When he has a place in Nashville, like a loft type of thing or a townhouse, whatever you call it. And him and Josh were playing stuff, and they were sitting there with the guitars, like, oh, what about if we try this chord? Let's try that. And I was just sitting there like, wow, this is freaking great, To watch the two of them sitting in a living room playing guitar, and like I filmed some of it on my camera secretly. I'm like, this is awesome. It was just like I felt like a kid in Disney World. I was like, this is amazing, the whole time. Like, is this really happening? Oh, it's really happening. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad you got that experience because it's awesome when you do.
yes,
It
because you're
is.
right. I mean, you read stories about bands that like are in the studio already having fights, fist fights. You've heard that like legendary stories where people don't talk to each other, and I'm like, it was not like that at all. I mean,
Awesome.
really, any record I've made has been like pretty much a positive experience. Not all of them, but most of them. You know.
Hmm. I think I lost you again. No, we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
That was a short crash, whatever you want to call it. But so how did the whole project come about, and like how did you end up working with Joe Bonamassa and those guys? Because I know you had like a very long break between doing records too. Like what was it, 12 years at some point?
Well, yeah, there was a point where I did make a record for 12 years, and then I made one in 2014 called Six String Stories, and then I made one in, oh no, 2016, and then I made one 2019 called Rise. So, but before that, I hadn't made one since 2002. So I took a long time off from the studio, and I was just playing so much and raising my daughter. So I was like, the studio and whatever. I didn't feel like, and I wasn't really touring. I was playing in Chicago 5 nights a week. So, but the last record I made, Rise, I really liked and enjoyed, and I enjoyed Six String Stories. And but the thing with Joe, how it happened was I had put like a guitar solo I did in May one night, just put it on Twitter, and it started to go crazy. Like Vernon Reid from Living Color tweeted it, and Tracy Guns from LA Guns tweeted it, and then Joe Bonamassa retweeted it. So I reached out to everybody in private message to Twitter saying, "Hey, I'm Joanna Connor, and if you ever want to get in touch with me," and Joe Bonamassa they all responded like, "You're great, we love you, you're blah blah blah." But Joe Bonamassa's like, "I want to help you," and I was like, "Oh my God, did he say that?" So we started a conversation. He called me the next day and he's like, "I would really like to make a record with you." So it finally happened in February. It took like so from May to February, and he's like, then he came in November to see me in Chicago because he was on tour, and saw my band, took notes, and then he started to like slowly assemble the engineers, the musicians, the studio, and yeah, and that's how it went.
That's awesome. Did you also
Yeah.
play on his cruise? I think I read that somewhere.
Did yeah that same month we were on the cruise, so
What's
the
that like?
set.
Because that sounds mental.
I had never been on a cruise in my life, so
Right,
I
right,
was
right.
like, I didn't know if I would like it or not. I'm like, I don't know. I get seasick, and I absolutely loved it. It was so relaxing. It was so gorgeous out there in the water, and then all this amazing music. I mean, I would do that all the time. I'm like, I can't wait to do this again. So that was, and then I got to sit in with Joe. He's like, "Do you want to sit in?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then I also got to be on another showcase with Paul Schaefer and Vernon Reid, Mike Zito, Tommy Emmanuel, the Living Color. I mean, it was incredible, and Joe and myself, and yeah, it was
Awesome.
really something. Yeah,
But so is it like 24/7 or is it there's a bit of a break?
there's like, well, from like 2 in the morning to like 10 in the morning, there's no music.
Right. I thought you meant that was the only time there was music.
No, I'm not 24. I know something like that. No, they would shut it down. I mean, now if people were jamming with each other, whatever, I don't know, but
Hmm.
yeah, no, that was it. And the rest of the time there was music.
Nice. So how long is that cruise? So where is it? Is it around Miami area or where is it?
That one was. I think they're all different. I mean, he does a European one and he does an American one. I'm not sure. I think this one went from Miami to the Bahamas and back.
Oh,
And I
nice.
guess like going there, they take their time. It was like 5 days, so we went pretty slow on the way there, and then on the way back, we kind of like boogied, you know. So the ship was. I'm like, oh, we didn't do this on the way here.
Right.
And so yeah, and it was just so. I mean, I had like my room had a I had this big window that overlooked, you know, the ocean, and I was like at night, it was just to see the ocean and nothing else but the ocean, and you're like laying in bed. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I slept really good. The ocean kind of
Nice.
rocked me to sleep. So, and then just to see all that music was, yeah, and jams, and you know the people on the boat were really nice, and it was just very well run. So
Awesome.
I would do that anytime they want. I would do that cruise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd love to see it actually. It would be very
Mm-hmm.
cool. Um,
It
but so
was.
I'd love to talk to you about your guitar playing too, because as you know, most people when they start out playing guitar learn, like quote unquote, learn blues licks, right? And that's sort of like the what you start out with, for lack of a better word. But how do you like yourself? How do you create your own voice? How do you not just repeat licks all the time? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, for one thing, I was always too lazy to learn someone's guitar solo. So there and said, "Oh, I'm going to learn every note that Stevie Ray Vaughan plays on this." So I did it. So my style, I mean, I'd listen, and I would get the idea of what they'd play, but I didn't like I said, I didn't sit there note for note. And then my guitar playing was always like a mashup of influences. It was like I played with this guy named Dion Payton the first few years, and because I loved the way he played, so I got a lot of ideas from him about how to get a good sound out of your guitar, how to play rhythm, how to approach arrangement, and then I picked up stuff from every band I was in, every musician I would play with, um, every show I would go to see, every record. So it's kind of like a piecing together a puzzle almost. So I think, and then I think everyone's hands and everyone's voice is different, and so I feel like if you're brave enough not to stick to one category, just like I'm gonna be Stevie Ray Vaughan, or I'm gonna be Jimi Hendrix, or I'm gonna be Bonnie Raitt. If you're brave enough to be who you are,
Hmm.
then you can be more of an original player. You know.
And how do you find who you are in that case?
Well, I mean, for some of us, we know from day one. Sometimes it's a lifelong process, but I mean, for me, I knew that I liked a lot of different types of music. I love the blues, and I studied it, but I also love jazz. I mean, different types of jazz. I love world music. So I love rock. And so I combine a lot of different. I have a very big open mind, so I love funk. I love soul. I love rhythm. So I always look for like really good rhythm sections to play with. So I don't know. It was just that was my organic kind of process of and I feel like every record I make is different, and because there's different phases of my life, you develop as a player, you develop as a singer, you're a different human as you get older. So, I
Hmm.
hear my voice on I mean, my voice definitely changed when I hit like 40. It got much deeper.
Hmm.
So when I hear my other records, I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound like a little girl. It's funny to me. And now you can hear like it's more raspy, it's deeper. And I don't smoke or anything. It just kind of naturally happened. But so I don't know. It's just a process. And I think if you're a real musician and you're more concerned with being a musician than being a star, you're always looking for ways to be better, or ways to just open up everything about your playing, or your
Hmm.
singing, whatever it is. But if you're always a student, I guess that's what I want to say. You're
Hmm.
never satisfied with yourself, so you always will evolve and get better. But I think if you like finding out who you are is just having the courage to like just be who you are and not hide behind any persona, or um, I don't know. I think a lot of times people are, they stick to a certain image or they stick to a certain genre, and they don't want, So you have to be courageous to be willing to figure out who you are and to embrace who you are. You
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, because I had a fascinating talk with maybe you're familiar with Anders Osborne. His
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said this really great exercise he did to being able to express his true self, which was um, he took note of how he spoke when he spoke to his wife. Let's say, he took note of which words he used, and so when he then did write a song, he wouldn't try to be someone else and try to explain, for example, his love for her as an example.
Mhm.
Have you like done a similar process in your involvement as an artist, maybe unconsciously or something that's happened over time?
That's interesting. No, I never did anything purposely. Like I never said, "Oh, I'm going to do this." I think I don't listen to myself often, but when I do, I critique what I do. I mean, usually I'm my own worst critic anyway. Like I'll play something and go, oh, and then I listen and go, oh, that was actually good. But I also think about a lot of things I do, like ways to sing, ways to phrase, how to be more soulful, how to be more expressive, how to I don't know, how to play guitar maybe more melodically here, maybe take your I don't know. I think about a lot of things I do.
Hmm.
So I don't know. For me it's more organic, I don't I however it unfolds, I don't the only like little exercise I do is because I tend sometimes if I get nervous, because I do still after all these years, I'll kind of like focus on letting energy flow up through my body more and be free. But other than that, I just let it go, let it unfold on its own.
Hmm. That takes courage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need courage in this life. I mean, you need courage just to be a human on the planet, because it's not easy for any of us. And then you need extra courage to want to be an artist of any type and make a life out of it. Um, so I think from day one, when you decide, hey, I want to be an artist and make a life as an artist, well, you're taking a big step. So
Hmm.
and also a funny thing because you need enough ego to get up on the stage, but you also have to, and eventually you have to. That ego can't rule the music. You have to surrender to the music. So it's like kind of like I always say, it's like yin and yang. Like with guitar, you need to be strong enough to play the guitar, but you need to, as time goes on, you need to develop a very light, loose touch to be a really good player. So it's always like yin and yang all the time.
Hmm. Totally. But you mentioned
Yeah.
life as an artist, and if I understood your career correctly, I mean, have you I mean, I guess you've been self-employed, like your own business, or have you always been signed and been employed like that, or how has that business side worked for you?
I mean, I started out being in other people's bands for a few years, but since like 1989, I've had my own band and my own. I was on some labels. I never had my own label per se. I mean, I put out a few little CDs to sell off the stage, but I never started my own record label or anything. But
Hmm.
yeah, I had booking agents, and I booked myself, but I'm not a really great business person, so to speak. Not like into marketing and negotiating and hanging out and networking. I just but I have worked really steadily for a long time, and I raised my family by myself, being a musician. So it was a good life. It wasn't a we weren't like living in the lap of luxury, but we lived just fine. So
Nice.
my kids are like, "Mom, you did a great job." So I'm like, "Okay." So we
Yeah,
made it, you know, and
definitely.
yeah,
But how have you sustained a career like that? Because like that it's not easy, and like just like your kids say, yeah, you did really well. But how did you build that momentum? How do you sustain your career?
Well, I mean, fortunately, living in Chicago playing the blues was a good decision because, this there is a lot of spotlight on it. There's a lot of festivals. There's a lot of players here. Um, so right place to be. And I mean, being a female guitar player, I was one of the first ones here in the States that was really doing it. Um, I mean, there might have been others, but I don't know. I don't know of them. So there was a few. There was just a handful. So that helped too because it's like, oh, there's this woman, lead singer, lead guitar player who has her own band and writes her own music and blah blah blah. So that helped. And then I think every time I got up on a stage, I gave it 100%. Like even though I was doing it all the time, I was just never happy unless I gave it my all. Now, did I succeed every night? No. I mean, there were some nights I'm like, oh God, I sucked tonight. But I always tried. So I always tried to be good. I was always, and then my business end was I was always on time.
Hmm.
I was always responsible. I was always trying to be polite. So I was trying to be at least a responsible business person in the sense that, I wasn't like showing up late to shows or, the band was not good or, I wasn't ready, so I was always, trying to keep it together that way. I wasn't like getting drunk on stage or being a prima donna, So I think I say this, I had a good work ethic
Hmm.
and that sustained me too. It wasn't like, oh no, Joanna's here. She's going to be a jerk or she's going to be late or she's going to be drunk or she's on drugs. They didn't have to deal with that. So,
Hmm.
I mean, you have to treat it like a business. Like I told my kids, I'm going to work. It was work,
Hmm.
So if you think that way, I mean, it's a great job, but it is a job. And there's some musicians that don't take it seriously like that. So if you
Hmm.
don't take it seriously, unless you're really lucky and get some kind of huge break and have managers babying you, that's one in a million. Most of us have to work our asses off, and you better be tight with your business, or you're not going to make it through.
Definitely. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, really well said.
Thank you.
Um, and how have you dealt with the business side where it comes to setting your rate for whatever work you're doing? Did that take some learning to get right to you?
I'm still bad at that. My
Right.
son is always like, "Ma, come on, Ma, stop being so nice." I'm
Hmm.
like, this is my thing. Like, I'm a person who feels like we should all live in harmony and everyone should have a place to live. I'm kind of I don't know how you say socialist, communist. I don't know. I'm not really into like, clawing my way to the top. And so I always feel like when I charge, I mean, I want to get a certain fee, but I'm not like, I'm sympathetic I'm too sympathetic, so I'm not a good negotiator. So that's why usually like a lot of times if I negotiate things, I'll be like, well, what is your offer? What do you want to offer me? And then I'll see, because sometimes I'll underprice myself.
Hmm.
Sometimes I might have overpriced myself, but usually it's underpriced. So that's been a way I've dealt with it. Unless I know for certain, like, hey, this person or this place has a lot of money, so I'm going to hit them up hard. But you know, I'm still not great at it. I always tell myself I tell people I'm a very bad capitalist. So
Yeah, it takes some learning, just like anything else.
yeah, it doesn't, it kind of like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know, it's me as a human or being an artist, and I know it's necessary to be, because there's things in life that require money that will make you happy. But it's like, I am just so about just being a human being that plays music and not being a business person. I don't know.
Hmm.
It doesn't appeal to me. It kind of makes me like, ugh. But I know it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. So,
Yeah.
so you said you prefer to ask people what the budget or whatever is rather than underprice. So did you used to do a lot of underpricing then, and then it bites you in the
I
ass, basically?
yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have got da 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 da.
Hmm.
So that's why I usually have an agent, because it's
Hmm.
like, let them be the ones that want to go out and be fierce about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And so you didn't always have an agent, I guess.
Well, when I stopped being on the road and I was playing around the city, I didn't need one because
Hmm.
basically I had two steady jobs every week, which is 4 nights a week. I played the
Mm.
House of Blues every week and the Kingston Mines 3 nights a week. So, and then other jobs around the city I booked myself. So it was, and basically in Chicago, everybody kind of makes the same,
Right.
pretty much the same money on the circuit. So it wasn't that difficult. But in terms of traveling and doing all that, that's a whole nother
Mm.
situation. And so I do have an agency now. And I had one in the beginning because for like 15 years, I was on the road. So I definitely had a booking agent.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And yeah, it's good to. I mean, if you're in this circuit, like you said in Chicago, it's yeah, it's good to then you know what the going rate is. That helps
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
But I mean, as an artist, if I'm not mistaken, I guess you experience highs, you experience lows. You know, maybe some gigs get canceled. I mean, especially I mean, now it's very obvious because of COVID.
Hmm.
But how have you dealt with that throughout the years when maybe it's been slow and money is like, damn, it's tight.
Oh, man. I have a million stories. It was rough. It was rough. I mean, I've sold guitars. You know, I've had to borrow money. I've sold jewelry. I mean, there was some tough situations. You're on the road and your transmission goes out in the middle of Nebraska. And it's $2,000 and you missed your
Wow.
gig. And I have a lot of those. Unfortunately, not too many, but enough of them. So
Right. Right.
somehow or another, I always got through. And by God's grace, sometimes it would be like at the end of my road, and then some gig would come through, or so it's kind of a mystical process at times. I'm like, oh, that happened. So I kind of learned to like stop worrying so much and just saying, you
Mm.
know what? As long as I keep working and keep plugging away and keep being responsible on my end, the universe is going to do what it's going to do. I mean, I never imagined COVID happening. So this has
No.
been None of us did. So this has been a twist in the plot that I never imagined in my life. So I've never had more than 2 weeks off ever
Wow.
without playing. So it's been pretty crazy. But I've been teaching a lot. I have like 30 students.
Nice.
I've been doing. I just started a podcast that
Mm.
and writing for two online sites, and they're paying me, so I'm surviving, And right now, I have nothing on my schedule
Mm.
except for one wedding and one show, and that's in the spring, and I have nothing.
Wow.
So we're gonna wait and see what happens. So this record, at first I thought, oh, what bad timing! I get this big break, and then this happens. But I think, well, could be perfect timing because I'm gonna need all the firepower I can get to get through whatever's gonna happen because a lot of clubs are gonna close. So, but
Yeah.
this will give me an extra, you know, push that I probably would need more now than ever.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. Definitely. But yeah, it's sad. We know with so many clubs closing and all that. I mean, yeah, God knows what's gonna happen and when stuff is gonna open up. I mean, I
Oh,
don't even
yeah.
know here. You know.
No, none of us do. Our industry, like all the entertainment industry, like we've all been reading about, we've been hit incredibly hard, and things are definitely shifted. I mean, I think clubs will open up again, but I think that there'll be new people owning them, and it's just a wait and see situation because none of
Mm.
like all around the world, it's all the same. Like nobody really knows what's going to happen.
No, exactly, exactly. Yeah, it sucks, and yeah,
It's
there's no answer either. There's no like, oh, just wait until this day. You know,
yeah, yeah.
we don't know. We don't know. But how important has patience and playing the long game been for your career?
It paid off because
Yeah.
look where I'm at right now. I mean, I'm also going to be in a movie with me
Oh,
and my
cool.
band going to come out with Ben Affleck, and a really major release. The guy found me on the internet. The director, his name's Adrian Lin. He did Fatal Attraction and Flashdance, but he hadn't made a movie in years. And he saw me. He's like, I want you in my movie. And he
Nice.
flew down to New Orleans and we're in a scene and it's one of the big scenes in the movie. And I'm like, so that's going to be out in the summer. But, I don't know. It's like
Awesome.
I definitely kept plugging away. And there were times I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I'm sick of, living this life or whatever. But I kept pushing, kept playing. And I have the best band. Like my band in Chicago, it's the best band I've ever had.
Hmm.
And I miss playing with them. And I'm like, man, I finally get this incredible band. We all like each other. And then boom, so my musicians they're really hurting, like mentally, I think. Especially my
Hmm.
bass player. He loves music more than anyone I've ever seen. And him not playing live, it's just I can tell it's killing him. So not literally, but it's
Hmm.
really hurting his spirit. So
Hmm.
and then we've done like a few online things, but it's just
Yeah,
not
that's
the.
like a hit and miss, I guess.
It's very hit or miss, and
Yeah.
I can't blame people, but the money you make from it is so minimal that it's fun to do, but you can't survive on it.
No, no.
Yeah. So yeah, but we'll see what's going to happen. I mean, I'm hopeful. Like people are saying, listen, by the time all of this lockdown's over, it's going to be like people are going to be going crazy to go out, and I'm like, well, I hope so. I hope there's somewhere to go out to. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. It's gonna be fine in the end.
I
It
think
always
it'll be.
is. Yeah.
I'm not pessimistic. I'm not like, oh no, it's over. I mean, I think it's going to be okay. I think we'll
Hmm.
all be. We'll get through somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. But Jana, it's been a pleasure. Maybe before we wrap up, do you have like a favorite failure from your career that turned out to be like a blessing in the end?
Oh boy, favorite failure. I don't know. I can't really think of one off the top of my head.
That's all right.
Oh no, when I was younger, yeah, I can kind of say this. Okay, so when I was like maybe in my late 20s, so almost 30 years ago, I had like two or three major labels looking at me, and none of it happened. Like, and I was really crushed. Like really crushed, like especially with one because he came to all my gigs and blah 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 blah, and then it didn't happen, and then and now I look back and I think to myself, you know what? I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready musically. I wasn't ready mentally for that road. I realize that now. I think I'm ready now. I may not look as good, but on the inside, I think I'm more ready. So I think life has its way of if you can just hang in there and be patient and like I said, keep working at what you do and developing your craft. If it's meant for you, it'll happen,
Hmm.
I think.
Hmm.
But you can't sit on your butt and wait for it. I mean, you got to be out there doing things. But like I said, I never stopped performing. I never. I took gigs that other people couldn't do. Oh, that's too late. It's too long. It's like, no, I'm working. I have to work. I had no other thing to fall back on. So, you know, yeah.
Hmm.
So that was a failure. That, in retrospect, I think it was okay.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Really
Yep.
appreciate it. But yeah, Joanna, real pleasure. So when is your album released? Maybe you can let us know and let us know where to find it and where to find more stuff about you in general.
Well, it's going to be out on February 26th, but you can order it now. It's on Apple Music. It's on Amazon. Joe Bonamassa, you can order it through his site. I have a YouTube channel I just started. It's Joanna Connor. I have joannaconnor.com for my website. On Facebook, Joanna Connor Band. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, so you can definitely find me every
Awesome.
day some kind of way.
But so is the record not coming out on Spotify?
Yes, and they're getting
Okay.
that to too. It's going to be on. I didn't even have. I didn't have control of my Spotify. It was my last record, but yeah, we're going to be on Spotify, and Joe has a whole team behind all that stuff, so it'll be everywhere. And we have a video that just came out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw it. That I feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Feels so good. I mean, I feel so good. And you can see it on YouTube. You can see it on Joe Bonamassa's Instagram. Um, and it's doing well. And at the end, it'll show you all kinds of places to get the record too. But yeah, so yeah, there you go.
Awesome, Joanna. Well, yeah, thank you again for taking your time, and it was a pleasure
Same.
talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Joanna. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed it as well. Check out her new album coming out, 4801 South Indiana Avenue. I'll leave a link so you can pre order it already. Check out her new single, I Feel So Good, produced by Joe, engineered by JJ, who's been on the show already. Do check out that interview. He's a great guy and a killer engineer. Also, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Your support really helps, and we're growing slowly but steadily. And that's all thanks to you. So I really do appreciate your support. Also, feel free to check out the Audio Tribe email list. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. Just enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe. It's all free, of course. You get exclusive access to interviews if you join, and much more stuff I like to do in the future. But that's it for this week. It was awesome having you here again, as always. So I'll see you next week. So take care.